This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, welcome back, guys. We went into this a little bit, the offshore versus domestic asset protection earlier, but I'm going to go into more detail here. So this offshore is considered advanced planning. It's usually um, it's usually used when there's a considerable risk that a person's coming after you and that they're probably going to be successful in court coming after you. And so when it gets to that level, we need to move it outside the jurisdiction of the United States. And so if it's getting that serious, then we can take measures to protect you, even if a U.S. judge says that you are liable and that you have to pay a certain amount of money to the plaintiff in order to solve the suit. Now, it takes a certain amount of gumption to do this, and a lot of attorneys will stay away from this because they're afraid. I don't know if I'm just reckless or stupid or what, but I'm not afraid of U.S. judges or attorneys. I follow the rules of the law. And so with that being said, I'm not afraid of any judge or any attorney as long as I'm legal. And so you can move an asset offshore and then a judge will hold you in contempt. So that just means that you're thumbing your fingers at thumbing your nose at his judgment or his order to repatriate the assets. That just means bring the assets back within the United States. If you don't do that, then he's going to hold you in contempt of his order, and then he might fine you, he might throw you in jail. But it rarely gets to that. There are a couple of cases in the United States where it did get to that. And even in those cases, the judge finally said, look, these guys are not going to comply regardless, so I'm just going to have to release them. So with that being said, attorneys don't want to move assets outside the United States. But the reason we do is because if you keep it in the United States, you're going to be up for grabs. I mean, if it's down at Bank of America, we're talking about money in this case. If your money or your stocks, whatever, is down at Bank of America, then your order can be straight to the bank. I mean, they can go to the bank and they can seize your account where you can't move anything. Whereas if it's in the Bank of Belize, Belize is not going to follow a United States judge's order. They would have to show that there's a criminal case involved with it, and then they may hear it. Now, another benefit of going offshore, in this case, Belize particularly, is that Belize, they use US dollars. It's mostly an English speaking country. They're in the same time zone as the US, and it's easy to get there. You know, last time I went, the tickets were around $600. But they may be 800 now. Doesn't matter. I mean, that's well worth the price to go down and see what you're doing. Shake hands with the politicians, meet the attorneys, meet your banker. You know, if you go to downtown Belize or downtown Panama, you're going to see Merrill Lynch, Bank of America. You know, you're going to see the same financial institutions that you'd see if you were downtown New York or downtown Boston. And so the entities that are down there, they're legitimate companies. They do a ton of business down there. And I'm sure you've probably heard of the big documentary they had, the Panama Papers. And the Panama Papers basically deal with people who were hiding money laundering, or drug cartels or gun runners and all of that stuff. That's criminal activity. Please don't mistake what I'm talking about. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff. I move assets that are legitimate. They're legitimate assets. For some reason, my clients think that it's threatened by the U.S. court system and that it's best to get it off the U.S. jurisdiction and move it into a foreign jurisdiction with no criminal intent implied. So let's see. Let me make sure I'm back on. I don't get too far off on a tangent here. So it says keeping the entities in the United States, some assets require local registration, such as real estate and some brick and mortar. Yeah. So if you have rental properties have to be, their LLCs have to be registered in the jurisdiction. You can't register. I mean, you can, but it wouldn't matter. You'd still have to do it locally as well. So you can have an local LLC for your rental property. And then if something happens, if you get sued or you need to sue someone, then you will have legitimate jurisdiction within that community to either file a lawsuit or fight a lawsuit. So you will need to register within that local state for an LLC. Now, if you wanted to, and it wouldn't matter in this case, you could have a foreign LLC own the local LLC. And then that'll give you another layer of protection. Is it 100% impenetrable? No, because they can still get to it. They just have to try harder, but believe me, they can. And so, yeah, so if you have a business, like I have quite a few businesses, I have contractors, I have HVAC guys, I have all sorts of local guys, lots of rental guys, guys, beauty shops, barber shops, painting companies, all that kind of stuff. I have all those businesses. That's a brick and mortar business. It has to be registered in its local community. I can have a parent company own them out of Wyoming if we want it to stay domestic, or I could have a parent company either in Belize or, some of the other foreign jurisdictions that we can set up as well. But if it's brick and mortar, you got to have a local LLC to have jurisdiction. Okay. Virtual businesses. Nowadays, we have a lot of online businesses, a lot of successful online businesses at that. So if you have an online business, then you have an advantage because you do not have to have a local registration. So we can put you in the best jurisdiction, which provides the most protection, and that's Wyoming. So if you're a virtual business, we can register you in Wyoming. We can give you about 2 or 3 levels right there in Wyoming of protection, and that's enough for most litigants to protect your assets under those entities. But so just to give you an idea, so offshore means that the likelihood of someone suing you is going to be successful, and if they are successful, they're going to get a charging order. The charging order will give them the authority to step in and take over your LLC and to force distribution, and so they can get paid. Now, that is a tall step. They would have to have gone through a lot of steps in order to get there, but the fact that there's a clear path to getting there is pretty scary. And so for that reason, we have an extra step that we take, and that's called offshore. Now, I want to get into some pricing here as well. And so if we're talking offshore, the easiest, the best, and most convenient location is going to be Belize. They offer a lot of protection for you. And the litigant, person suing you, has to post a bond in Belize in order to file a suit in Belize. The last time I looked, that bond was $50,000. And so they'd have to pay an attorney They'd have to pay the bond before they could even get a day in court. So a lot of people are not willing to do that. And so that by itself is a deterrent for suing you offshore. Now, when I take a client offshore, we typically do a in-country visit. You and I'll go there with you. We'll take care of all the arrangements, your flight, your hotel, your food. We do all of those arrangements for you. We do an introduction with a local attorney. We do introduction with public officials and bankers. And we set up a lot of your entities there. So if you're setting up a bank account, then you do that right while we're there, right with the banking professions. I don't even attend that meeting. I don't want to know your bank account. I don't want to know your numbers. I don't want any of that stuff. You should trust no one when you do this. So when we go, I'll make the introductions and you take care of your business behind closed doors. I don't want to know anything about it. Now that particular entity starts at 24,000. Now we do that, and you'll need to pay that up front before we do anything. Now, once we get in country, then you'll start meeting people, seeing people, things, making sure that you're comfortable with these things. If at any time this is not what you want, you start to feel funny about the arrangements, then we will refund an amount less our expenses for going there. So with that being said, I try to put you in the most comfortable position as you can, and we will have conversations, emails, meetings before we even go there. So you'll know these people, you'll know who we're meeting, you'll know all of that stuff. If your arrangement is more complicated than that, if we need what we call a jump statute, where if something happens in Belize and it starts to get close, we will jump you to another location, Cook Islands or somewhere like that. We can do that as well. Then the cost will go up. So if we have to put a jump statute in place, that's about 30,000 for everything. But again, we're not talking about moving a small amount of money. I think the amount that should be considered is somewhere around $500,000. I think it's easier to spend $50,000 to protect 500,000. I think that's just reasonable. So that's what we look at. Now, domestic is different. So domestic, we're dealing with Wyoming officials, Wyoming agents, Wyoming bankers. So all of that stuff's taken care of within the United States. You don't have to travel anywhere. Most of this is done online. I do most of my work online for these organizations. Now, those start at $10,000. That will take care of all of your entities. That's about 3 LLCs, if I'm not mistaken. It takes care of your domestic asset protection trust. It pays for your certification and your registered agents. And we do those for 10,000. If for any reason it gets more complicated, then I will let you know that up front. I will let you know that this is not a $10,000 formation, that this is going to be 12 or this is going to be 15 or whatever case may be. But I'll let you know up front what it's going to cost. And also, we typically want you to be situated with your personal assets before we do domestic or offshore. So we need to get in place a basic estate plan for you and your family. That's going to take care of things if something happens to you or your wife, sooner rather than later. And we don't know that. So best thing to do is prepare in advance to put those important documents in place. A will, healthcare powers of attorney for someone to step in and make medical decisions if you're in a situation where you can't do it for yourself. Same thing for financials. Running a business, collecting, accounts payable, billing someone, collecting rents, leasing apartments, refinancing your rentals, whatever. You need those positions, you need those people in position before that happens. And the best way to do that is set those up now. That way we know that all ground is covered, whether it's personal or whether it's business, you're going to be protected either way it goes. All right, I think that's enough for this one. We're going to exit here and then we're going to get ready for the next one, and then we'll